Imagine you are the most feared man in the city. 3 wars survived. A dozen enemies buried. Not one person in any room would ever dare lay a finger on what is yours. And tonight, at your own engagement party, beneath $400,000 of white roses and a chandelier the size of a car, you lift a glass of champagne to your lips, and a woman nobody has looked at all night crosses the entire ballroom, puts her bare hand over your cup, and tells you that if you take one more breath of it, you'll be dead before the music stops. Who is she? How could she possibly know? And why does a single look from her unravel 10 years of a careful, dangerous plan in the space of one heartbeat? Her name is Vera. 9 years ago, the people in this very room destroyed her, laughed at her, ruined her family, and forgot her name before the night was over. They thought she was gone for good. They were wrong. She came back. And she came back as the one person in this city who can taste a murder before it happens. This is a story about the woman the world overlooked, and the dangerous man who finally saw her about a secret 9 years in the making, a betrayal hiding inside a wedding, and a love that should never have survived either. So pour yourself something, dim the lights, and before we begin, if you love a slow-burn Mafia Boss romance where the quiet woman in the corner turns out to be the most powerful person in the room, do me one small favor. Tap that subscribe button now, so the next story finds you comfortable. Good. Then let's begin. Chapter 1: The Glass. The first thing Vera Hale noticed was the smell of bitter almonds, where bitter almonds had no business being. It came to her under the perfume and the candle smoke and the $400,000 of fresh white roses banking the walls of the Thorn Mansion ballroom, a thin, sweetish metallic note threading up out of a single coupe of vintage champagne on a silver tray. She had been pouring wine in that room for 3 hours without a soul looking at her face. She was the help. She was a black uniform and a steady hand and a name no one had bothered to ask. That was exactly why she had taken the job. But she had the best nose in the city, and the best nose in the city does not unsmell a thing once it's there. Across the ballroom, on a low dais beneath a chandelier the size of a car, Dominic Castellano lifted that very glass. She knew him the way everyone in Boston knew him. The way you know a closed door at the end of a hallway you've been told never to open. The head of the Castellano family. The man other dangerous men cross streets to avoid. He stood in a black tuxedo with the stillness of something that did not need to move, to be obeyed, and beside him, radiant in silver, her hand resting on his forearm like a brand, stood the woman the whole night was built to celebrate, Celeste Marchetti. Vera's stomach turned to cold water at the sight of her the way it always did, the way it had for 9 years. But she didn't have time for the past. The toastmaster was already lifting his voice. To the union of 2 great families, 200 crystal flutes rose into the candlelight like a field of ice. And Dominic Castellano, who trusted no one, who had survived 3 wars and a dozen men who'd sworn to bury him, brought the poisoned glass to his mouth. Because the one place a careful man forgets to guard is the rim of his own cup at his own party. Later, Vera would not be able to explain the thing that moved her. It wasn't courage. She had spent 9 years building a life out of not drawing attention. It was something older than thought, the same reflex that had once made her father shove her behind him in a dark parking lot, the body deciding before the mind could vote. She crossed 40 feet of marble in the time it takes a room to inhale. Bodyguards turned. Hands went inside jackets. Somebody said hey, and none of it mattered, because Vera Hale's bare hand closed over the crystal an inch from Dominic Castellano's lips, and the room stopped. For one suspended second, nobody breathed. 200 glasses hung in the air. The string quartet's bow scraped to silence, and Vera stood there in her serving uniform, gripping the most feared man in New England's drink, close enough to feel the warmth coming off his jaw, looking up into a pair of eyes, the gray of a January harbor eyes, that were already cataloguing her, deciding what she was deciding, whether she would leave the building alive. "Don't," she said. Her voice came out low, and even which surprised her. It's been cut with something. A guard's gun was already against her temple. She felt the cold ring of it, and didn't look away from him. Dominic Castellano did not flinch. He did not signal the guard to fire, and he did not signal him to lower it. He simply looked at her hand on his glass, at the steadiness in it, at the fact that she had touched what no one in this city touched, and something flickered behind the gray. Not fear, interest. The dangerous surgical interest of a man who has spent his whole life reading rooms and has just found one variable that doesn't fit the equation. Cut with what he said. Calm, quiet, as though they were alone. Cyanide salt, if I had to guess. There's a marzipan note that doesn't belong in a krug. She swallowed. I pour wine for a living. I'd stake my life on it. The corner of his mouth moved not a smile, nothing so warm. You already have, he said. And then without raising his voice at all, he said one word to the room, lock it. The doors boomed shut. Somewhere a woman screamed. And in the half-second of chaos that followed, Vera made the mistake that would change everything. She let her eyes go just once to the dais, to Celeste, who was not screaming, who was not confused, who was standing very, very still in her silver gown, with one hand pressed flat against her sternum, watching her fiancé survive, and on her perfect face, for one unguarded instant, before the mask came back down, was the precise, ugly expression of a woman watching a plan die. Vera knew that expression. She had been on the receiving end of it once a long time ago, in another ballroom when she was 19, and her whole life came apart in front of 300 laughing people. Dominic Castellano followed her gaze. He was a man who missed nothing, and he did not miss the way the sommelier looked at his bride-to-be. He filed it. He filed all of it. Then he turned back to Vera, and for the first time in 9 years, someone in a room full of beautiful, important people looked directly at her, saw her, the whole of her, the way you see a person and not a function, and said, "What's your name?" "Vera," she said. "Vera Hale. Vera Hale." He set the glass down on the silver tray with the care of a man defusing a bomb. "You're not leaving my sight tonight." It did not sound like a thank you. It sounded like a sentence being passed. Chapter 2. What you are. They took her to a study at the back of the mansion. Dark wood, a fire someone had let burn down. To coals, a wall of books no one had ever read. 2 guards stood at the door. Dominic Castellano stood at the window with his back to her, watching the snow come down over the harbor lights, and let her sweat in the silence for a long time before he spoke. "There are 3 kinds of people who save a man's life," he said. "People who love him, people who want something from him, and people who put the poison there in the first place and lose their nerve." He turned. The firelight cut his face into hard planes. "I don't know you, Miss Hale. So you're going to tell me which one you are. And you're going to do it before my patience runs out, because tonight my patience is very expensive." "I'm none of them," Vera said. "Everyone is one of them. Then I'm the 4th kind." She lifted her chin. The gesture felt strangely familiar in her own body, like a thing she'd been taught once and forgotten. The kind who can't stand in a room and let a man die when she could stop it. "Even a man like you." Something passed over his face. "Even a man like you." No one spoke to him that way. He crossed the room slowly, and she made herself hold her ground as he came, because she understood instinctively that this was a man who fed on the people who flinched and starved, the ones who didn't. He stopped close, closer than was polite. She could see the faint white line of an old scar at his temple. The exhaustion he hid under control, the way his eyes moved over her face, like he was trying to place her in a memory he couldn't reach. "You knew," he said softly. "Not guessed. Knew. You smelled it across a ballroom full of perfume, and you were sure enough to put your hand on my cup with a gun in the room. That's not a waitress, Miss Hale, so I'll ask you plainly. Who taught you to do that?" The truth sat in her throat like a stone. "My father. Before your bride's family destroyed him." She didn't say it. 9 years had taught her that the truth was the most dangerous thing she owned, and you never spent it before you had to. "My father was a wine importer," she said. "It was true as far as it went. He had a gift. I inherited it. That's all." "That's not all," Dominic said, "but it's a start." He studied her one moment more, then stepped back, and the air came back into the room. "Marco." A guard stepped in. "Miss Hale is a guest of mine now," Dominic said, not taking his eyes off her. "Her things from the kitchen, her coat, and find out everything about her by morning. Where she lives, who she talks to, what she eats for breakfast." A pause, and put 2 men on her. "If she leaves the city, I want to know before she does." "You can't keep me," Vera said. "Miss Hale." He shrugged into his coat, and for 1 second the mask slipped, and she saw underneath it the thing the city was right. To be afraid of the cold, the patience, the absolute will. "Someone in this house tried to kill me tonight. You are the only person in Boston I'm certain didn't. That makes you at this exact moment the safest place I have to stand." He looked at her. And the most dangerous, because I don't understand you yet. I always come to understand the things I keep. He walked out into the snow. Behind him, Vera Hale stood alone in the firelight with her heart slamming and understood two things with perfect clarity. The first was that she had just walked on purpose with both eyes open into the center of the exact world she had spent 9 years circling from the dark. The second was that the man who'd looked at her like that, like she was a locked door at the end of a hallway he fully intended to open, was the most frightening and the most seen she had felt since the night her life was taken from her. She hated how much she wanted him to look at her again. Chapter 3. 9 years ago. The thing about being erased is that you remember the exact moment it happens. For Vera, it was the Whitmore Charity Gala, the year she was 19, the year her father still had his name and his clients, and the warm, terrifying confidence of a man at the top of his small kingdom. Julian Hale had the finest palate on the East Coast and a wine import house that supplied half the old money in New England, and that night he was being honored, and Vera wore a borrowed dress and stood at his elbow glowing with a child's pride. She remembers Celeste Marchetti the way you remember the first time something beautiful is cruel to you. Celeste had been 20, already engaged to her family's ambitions, already moving through the world like it owed her a curtsy. She and her friends Margot Devlin with her cigarette laugh, Sloane Ashby with her camera, the whole glittering pack of them had decided that the importer's daughter in the off-the-rack dress was the night's to entertainment. It started small. A spilled drink so sorry down the front of the borrowed silk. A whispered question loud enough to carry about whether they'd hired help that cleaned up and attended. Laughter that found Vera across every room she tried to hide in. It would have been survivable. Girls had been cruel to her before, but Celeste hadn't built her night around humiliating a teenager. She'd built it around something colder. Midway through the evening, the gala's prized auction lot, a case of pre-war Burgundy worth more than Vera's college tuition, was discovered to be counterfeit, tampered, refilled, and there, in front of 300 of the most important people in Boston, with a documentary smoothness that Vera only understood years later, the trail was laid at Julian Hale's feet, his shipment, his seal, his name on the manifest. She would spend the next 9 years proving the seals had been switched. That night, all anyone saw was the great Julian Hale going white at his own honor dinner, while a room of his clients turned their backs one by one. He never recovered. The clients left. The lawsuits came. The house went. And 18 months later, Julian Hale died in a rented apartment that smelled of nothing at all. A broken man who never stopped saying, "I don't understand, Vera." I checked those cases myself, and Vera understood even then that no one had killed him with a knife. They had killed him with a story. And the girl who wrote the story had laughed about it over champagne. There was only one mercy in that whole black night, and Vera had carried it for 9 years like a coal that never went cold. In the worst moment after the spill before the auction, when she was standing alone by a service door with mascara running, and the laughter following her like wolves, a young man had stopped. He couldn't have been more than 22, dark, quiet, dressed in a tuxedo that fit him too well for someone that age, with grey eyes that took in the whole scene in one pass and missed nothing. He didn't laugh. He didn't pity her, which would have been worse. He took the folded handkerchief from his breast pocket and held it out, and when she didn't move, he simply pressed it into her hand, and he said one thing low, so only she could hear it. "Don't let them see you fold. People like that, it's the only thing they're hungry for." A pause. Chin up. "You'll bury all of them one day." Then someone called a name she didn't catch, and he was gone into the crowd, and she never learned who he was. She had kept the handkerchief. She had kept his voice. Chin up. You'll bury all of them one day. In the lowest years, the ones with the cheap apartments and the double shifts and the wine certification she paid for one exam at a time, those words were the spine she leaned on when she had no other. She trained her nose until it was a weapon. She earned the pins, the titles, the reputation that finally let her walk into the rooms that had thrown her out. And she started keeping a notebook, small black leather, in which she wrote down, year after year, every crime the Marchetti family let slip in front of the help. Because the help is invisible, and invisible people hear everything. She had nearly enough now. A shipment that was never wine. A man named Renato who went into Boston Harbor and didn't come out. Numbers, dates, names. One more season inside their world and she'd have a case even a bought judge couldn't bury. That was why she had taken the job, pouring wine at Celeste Marchetti's engagement gala. She had not planned to save the groom. Chapter 4, The Glass House. They moved her into the penthouse 2 days later, and it was the most beautiful prison Vera had ever seen. 60 floors over Boston, all glass and shadow the harbor, a sheet of hammered pewter below. Dominic Castellano lived like a man who owned the sky and didn't enjoy it. There were no photographs, no softness, only books and good wine she was not invited to drink, and the long silences of a man who had taught himself not to need anyone sitting in the dark watching a city that feared him. He told her it was for her protection. The poisoner was still loose. Whoever had tried for him would try again, and might decide the sommelier who'd ruined the attempt was a thread worth cutting. All of that was true. None of it was the whole truth, and they both knew it. The whole truth was that Dominic Castellano kept things he didn't understand close until he understood them, and he did not yet understand her. So they circled each other. He worked. Men came and went hard, men lawyers, a banker who left sweating. Vera learned the geometry of the place and the people in it. She learned that the cold uncle who came on Thursdays was Salvatore Castellano, Dominic's father's brother, who smiled too much and watched the room like a man counting exits. She learned that the consigliere Enzo loved Dominic like a son and slept badly. She learned that no one in that house spoke Celeste Marchetti's name without lowering their voice, and that the wedding everyone was planning was a wedding no one seemed to want. The days took on a strange domestic rhythm, the way captivity does when no one is unkind. She cooked because she couldn't stand to be useless, and the hard men who guarded the door learned to drift toward the kitchen at 6. She read his unread books. She memorized the harbor's moods. And every day at some unpredictable hour, Dominic Castellano would come back into the glass house, carrying the cold of the city on his coat. And the first thing his eyes would do before the guards, before Enzo, before the night's bad news was find her. She told herself she didn't watch the door for it. She was lying, and her own nose, which could not be lied to, knew it. The smell of her own pulse gave her away every time the elevator chimed. One evening, she cut her hand on a wine cork's foil, a stupid bright line of red across her thumb, and Dominic was across the room and had her hand in his before she'd finished the curse. He didn't fuss. He simply held her thumb to the light, his own hands, hands that had ended men, unfathomably careful, and pressed a cloth to it, and did not let go for 1 second longer than the wound required, and then several seconds more. "You bleed too easily for this world," he said, low. "I'll have to keep you out of it." It was the closest thing to tenderness she'd heard in the building, and he seemed to startle himself with it because he set her hand down and walked away mid-breath, leaving her standing at the counter with a bandaged thumb and heart that would not slow. And she learned the way Dominic Castellano watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. It was nothing she could have testified to. A held gaze across the long room that broke a half-second too late. The way he went still when she laughed once, surprised at something on the news as though the sound were a language he'd forgotten. The night she couldn't sleep and came out to find him at the window with 2 glasses of a Barolo older than she was, and he handed her one without a word, and they stood there not touching while the snow erased the city, and he said, "Finally, you don't drink it like someone showing off. You drink it like you're listening to it." "That's what my father called it," she said before she could stop herself. "Listening." He turned his head. The harbor light slid along his jaw. "Your father," he said. "The importer with the gift." Yes, what was his name? And there it was again, the stone in her throat, the most dangerous thing she owned. She looked into the wine. "Does it matter?" "Everything about you matters," Dominic Castellano said with the quiet finality of a man stating a fact he had only just discovered and already resented. That's the problem. He didn't touch her. He almost did. She saw his hand move the smallest fraction toward the strand of hair. The heat had pulled loose at her temple, and then he stopped the way. He stopped everything he hadn't decided was safe, and he set down his glass and said goodnight, and left her alone with her heart going like a hunted thing. She stood at the glass a long time after. "You'll bury all of them one day," the stranger had said 9 years ago. She had built her whole life around that sentence. She had a notebook full of the proof. She was 1 season from finishing it. So, why did her hands shake? When the man who'd nearly died at her hand looked at her like she was the only real thing in a city made of glass. Chapter 5. The Notebook. Celeste came to the penthouse on a Tuesday, and the temperature of the building dropped 10 degrees. Vera heard her before she saw her, the bright, carrying laugh, the heels on marble, the voice that had narrated the worst night of Vera's life, and never once cracked. She had perhaps 3 seconds to decide whether to hide, and she chose deliberately not to. She had spent 9 years being invisible. She was done. So this is the famous sommelier. Celeste swept into the kitchen where Vera stood, and her gaze did the old familiar work down up dismissing pricing. She was more beautiful than she'd been at 20, and infinitely more dangerous, and she did not recognize Vera at all. That was the thing about people who erase you. They never bother to remember the eraser. The little hero. Dominic can't stop talking about you. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. Should I be jealous? I just pour the wine, Vera said. Celeste drifted closer, and there it was, under the perfume faint, the same sweet metallic ghost Vera had smelled on a glass 2 nights before. Not on her breath, on her hands. The smell of someone who handled the stuff and scrubbed and never quite got it out from under the nails. Vera kept her face a careful blank and felt her pulse go to war. You know what I've learned pouring wine for important people, Celeste said. The help sees everything. Her eyes glittered, and the smart ones learn to forget it. The ones who remember they tend to have accidents. Slip in the kitchen, fall in the harbor. She let the words hang light as a feather, heavy as a body. I'd hate for our little hero to have an accident. Then she smiled, kissed the air beside Vera's cheek and was gone, leaving the smell of bitter almonds and a threat dressed as a compliment. Dominic found her 10 minutes later, still standing at the counter, both palms flat on the cold marble. He didn't ask what was wrong. He was a man who read silence better than speech, and her silence was loud. He came and stood beside her, close, not touching, watching her reflection in the dark window the way she always watched the harbor. She said something to you, he said. She said the help who remembers things tends to slip in the kitchen. Vera kept her voice flat, or fall in the harbor. For a moment, the only sound was the building breathing. Then Dominic Castellano said very quietly in the voice that made other men go pale, "No one in this city is going to touch you, Vera. Not her, not anyone. I want you to understand that the way you understand the things you smell completely before the thought finishes." His reflection turned to hers in the glass. "I have spent 10 years making sure that the things I decide to keep, I keep. Do you believe me? I believe you'd try," she said. "That's not the same as believing me." "No," Vera agreed softly. "It isn't." But she let herself lean just slightly into the warmth of him standing there, a half-inch of surrender she'd never have allowed herself a week ago, and felt him go still as stone beside her, holding his breath like a man afraid to spook. A wild thing that had finally almost come to his haunt. Vera went to her room and locked the door and sat on the floor and breathed. She took out the notebook. 9 years of small black ink. She turned to a clean page and her hand was steady when she wrote Celeste M. Cyanide on Hand's night of gala. She poisoned the glass. She missed. She knows I know. And under it, because she was an honest accountant of her own heart, even when it terrified her, she is going to try again. On him. And I am going to stop her. Not for him. For the case. She almost believed the last part. That night, the building's power cut for 90 seconds, long enough for a man she'd never seen to come up the service stairs with a wire in his hands, and long enough for Vera, who could not sleep, who was standing at the dark glass, thinking about a handkerchief to see his reflection unfold. Behind her in the window, an instant before the lights died. She did not scream. Screaming was for people who expected help. She picked up the Barolo decanter, crystal heavy. The only weapon in a room full of beautiful, useless things. And when the dark came and the floor creaked, she swung at the place a tall man's skull would be and connected, and the wire went wide. And then the emergency lights stuttered on, and Dominic Castellano was in the doorway with a gun already up and the intruder already turning to run. Dominic did not run him down. He simply fired once low, and the man went down screaming with his knee gone, and 3 guards were on him in seconds. It was over in less time than it takes to describe. In the ringing aftermath, Dominic crossed the room and took Vera by the shoulders the first time he had touched her and turned her toward the light, his eyes going over her face, her throat, her hands fast and clinical and not clinical at all. "Are you hurt?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand of the universe. "No." Her voice shook. The decanter was still in her hand. "I'm fine. I hit him. The Barolos everywhere. I'm sorry, it was a good year." And Dominic Castellano, the most feared man in New England, made a sound she would never forget. It was almost a laugh. It came out of him like it hurt, like a thing rusted shut, and he pulled her in against his chest before either of them decided he would, and he held her there in the dark and the broken glass with his heart slamming against her cheek, and he said low and rough into her hair, "You are the strangest, most reckless, most impossible woman I have ever met. And if you ever stop being it, I'll know they replaced you." She should have pulled away. She had a notebook full of reasons. She didn't. For one long moment, Vera Hale stood in the arms of the man whose bride had ordered her killed, and let herself be held, and understood that she was in terrible, beautiful trouble. Chapter 6. The Handkerchief. The man with the ruined knee did not talk. He didn't have to. Dominic already knew. It was sent from inside, he told her the next morning. They were on the helipad 60 floors up the wind off the Atlantic, flattening the world because it was the one place in the building he was certain no one could listen. He had stopped pretending she was a guest. He spoke to her now the way he spoke to Enzo, as someone whose mind he had decided to trust, which for Dominic Castellano was a more naked thing than any embrace. The power codes that killed the lights last night belonged to 4 people. Me, Enzo, my uncle Salvatore. A muscle worked in his jaw, and the Marchettis. Through the engagement, through her. You think Celeste tried to have me killed? I think Celeste tried to have me killed at my own party, Dominic said, and you got in the way, and now she's cleaning up the witness. He turned to face her coat snapping in the wind. I need you to tell me what you saw on her face that night. Don't tell me what a waitress saw. Tell me what you saw, because you knew her, Vera. I watched you look at her. You've hated that woman for years. The harbor roared below. The moment had finally come the way every dangerous moment comes, not when you've planned for it, but when the wind is too loud to lie over. So she told him. She told him about the gala 9 years ago. The borrowed dress, the spilled drink, the counterfeit burgundy, the trail laid at her father's feet. She told him about Julian Hale dying in a room that smelled of nothing. She told him about the notebook, 9 years of small black ink, the shipments and the harbor, and a man named Renato. An entire case against the Marchetti family built by an invisible woman pouring their wine. She told him she had taken the job at the engagement gala to finish it, and that she had never planned to save the groom. And then, because the wind was loud and her courage had finally come all the way up, she told him the last thing. There was one person who was kind to me that night, she said. A man, young. He gave me his handkerchief and he told me not to let them see me fold. Her voice caught. He told me I'd bury all of them one day. I never knew his name. I've carried that sentence for 9 years. It's the reason I'm still standing. She looked up at him, and the wind tore the tears off her face before they could fall. I didn't know it was you until last night. Until you laughed. I'd know that voice anywhere. Dominic Castellano went very still. She watched it land. She watched the cold, controlled, dangerous man reach back across 9 years to a charity gala he'd attended as his father's heir. A night he'd forgotten the way the powerful forget. The small mercies they hand out, and find a trying girl by a service door and a handkerchief and a sentence he'd said and never thought of again. That was you, he said. Wonder cracked through the control like sun through ice. The importer's daughter. They were tearing you apart and you wouldn't fold. He took a step toward her. I thought about you. After. For years sometimes. I never knew what happened to you. His hand came up, and this time it did not stop. He touched the loose hair at her temple, tucked it back, his fingers cold from the wind and gentle, in a way that did not match anything else about him. And here you are, in my house, burying all of them exactly like I said. His voice dropped. Vera, you impossible woman. You came back as the answer to your own life. Dominic. She put her hand flat on his chest over the wild heart and felt him go rigid at the contact. I have to tell you the rest. The reason I can't, the reason this can't, the words wouldn't come. I came here to destroy the family you're marrying into. That's who I am. I'm not the woman who saves you. I'm the woman who came to burn your whole world down, and I just hadn't met you yet. I know, Dominic said. She stared at him. You think I didn't run you the night you grabbed my glass, a ghost of that rusted almost laugh. I knew you were Julian Hale's daughter by the next morning. I knew about the notebook by the second day. My men aren't artists, but they're thorough. He caught her hand against his chest and held it there. I let you keep circling because I wanted to see what you'd do. And what you did, Vera. It was hate the Marchettis, with 9 years of patience and a case good enough to put them in the ground. His eyes burned into hers. Which makes you the most useful person in Boston. Because I want them in the ground too. The wind howled. Below them the city went about its small lives, never knowing. Then tell me your secret. Vera said. "You've had all of mine." And Dominic Castellano told her the truth that no one else alive knew, that he had never wanted to marry Celeste Marchetti, that the entire engagement was a snare bait he'd set with his own hands, an alliance offered up to the very family he believed had murdered his father, the old Don, 10 years before, that he'd been waiting patient as winter for the Marchettis to make a move on him so he could finally see the whole shape of the thing, every traitor, every buyer, every hand. That the poisoned glass at his own engagement party had been in the worst possible way, exactly what he'd been waiting for. "They moved early," he said, "and someone inside my own house helped them. I've been trying to find out who without tipping that I'm hunting." He looked at her, and the last wall came down, and then a sommelier nobody noticed put her bare hand on my cup and changed every calculation I've made for 10 years. Because now I don't just want them dead, Vera. His grip tightened. Now I want to be alive at the end of it. With you. And that is the most dangerous thing that has happened to me in my entire life. Chapter 7. The Wolf in the House. They built it together after that in the long, dangerous nights. Her case and his war fitted into one weapon. Vera's notebook had the crimes. Dominic had the power to make them land. But the missing piece, the one they both circled, was the traitor inside the Castellano house. The man who'd opened the door for the poison, who'd cut the lights, who'd sold the old Don a decade ago. Without him taking down the Marchettis, just started a war the Castellanos might lose. With him, they could cut the whole rotten tree down in one stroke. The trouble was that the trap required Dominic to keep playing the groom. And so while they hunted the wolf in private in public, Dominic Castellano had to go on belonging to Celeste Marchetti, and Vera had to watch. The worst of it was the Harbour Conservancy Gala, the kind of black tie night the city's old money built its whole year around. Dominic had to appear. Celeste had to be on his arm, and Vera, because Dominic would no longer let her out of his sight, even for an evening, went too back in the black uniform, to back behind the wine, invisible by design, watching the man who'd asked her to be alive at the end of all this walk a ballroom with another woman's hand branded onto his sleeve. It should not have hurt. She knew it was theater. She'd helped write it. It hurt anyway, with a sharp animal stupidity that embarrassed her every time Celeste laughed her carrying laugh and tipped her bright head against his shoulder, and the cameras loved them. Vera poured wine for socialites, who looked through her and tasted nothing. They drank and told herself. The ache in her chest was just the old wound, the gala 9 years ago, the borrowed dress. She was lying again. Her nose knew. Her nose always knew. Across the room, Dominic found her. Of course he did. In the middle of a sentence to a senator with Celeste glittering at his side. His grey eyes lifted and crossed 40 feet of candlelight and landed on the woman pouring wine in the corner and stayed. 1 second. 2. Long enough that Celeste followed the look and found nothing where it landed, because who looks at the help? Long enough that Vera felt it like a hand on the back of her neck. Then he turned back to the senator and the theater went on, and Vera carried her bottle into the service hall and stood against the cold wall and made herself breathe. He came to her there. He shouldn't have. It was reckless in a way. The careful Dominic Castellano was never reckless. He left a ballroom full of people who measured his every move and followed an importer's daughter into a dark service corridor, and when she turned and found him there, closed the gold light from the ballroom, catching one side of his face. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. "You shouldn't be back here," Vera said finally. "Someone will see. Let them." His voice was low and rough. "I've watched you watch me all night. I've had her hand on my arm for 3 hours, and the only thing I've wanted to do is cross the room and pull you out of that corner where they all keep pretending you don't exist." He took a step. The bottle was still in her hands, between them, a thin glass border. "I'm so tired, Vera, of pretending I belong to her. It's the trap," she whispered. "You built it. We finish it." After he agreed, and his hand came up to the side of her face, and she felt the calluses and the cold and the way it trembled, just barely, this man who never trembled. He bent his head. She felt his breath. The whole world narrowed to the inch of dark air between them, and she did not pull away. She rose into it. A door opened down the corridor. Light spilled. A caterer, with a tray, oblivious, passing through. By the time the man had gone, Dominic had stepped back into the shadow, and the moment had closed like water over a stone, and the careful mask was on again, and only the wildness in his eyes betrayed what had almost happened. After he said again, but it sounded like a vow now, and a warning, and a thing barely held. "Go home, Vera. The penthouse. I'll come when I can. He turned to go, then stopped without looking back. I have wanted to do that for 9 years, he said quietly. I just didn't know your name yet. Then he walked back into the gold light and the other woman's hand. And Vera stood alone in the dark with a bottle of someone else's wine, and understood that whatever was between them was now far past the point where finishing the case could leave either of them whole. It was Vera who found him. Of course it was. Because she had spent her life being invisible, and invisible people see the thing the powerful are too proud to look at. She found him in a wine cellar. Salvatore Castellano, the smiling Uncle Dominic's own blood, kept a private collection in the sub-basement of the family's North End club, and one Thursday Vera sent to verify a delivery smelled it again. The sweet, metallic ghost, faint in the cold cellar air, clinging to a crate that had no business smelling of anything but oak and old Burgundy. She'd spent 9 years smelling for exactly this. She didn't touch it. She memorized the lot number, the seal, is the precise place. It didn't match the manifest. The same trick, she realized with a cold drop in her stomach, that had been used on her father 9 years before. Switched seals. A name laid in a paper trail like a body in a shallow grave. Only this time, the name being framed wasn't Julian Hale. It was Dominic. She understood the whole shape of it standing in that cellar with her heart in her throat. Salvatore and the Marchettis together. Kill Dominic with poison frame, a rival family for the hit. Let the Castellano soldiers go to war and bleed. And in the smoke, let Uncle Salvatore step forward as the grieving, reasonable head of the family married through Celeste into the very people who'd built the trap. The boy who once stood up for a crying girl would die a murdered king, and the wolves would split his kingdom between them. She had until the wedding. After the wedding, the alliance was sealed and Dominic was a dead man walking. You can't confront him, she told Dominic that night. The two of them bent over the notebook and the photographs in the blue dark of the penthouse. Salvatore. The second he knows you know, he moves, and Celeste Vera's jaw set. Celeste poisons people for fun, Dominic. If she thinks the game's up, she'll burn it all down and walk away clean. We can't outfight them. We have to outpour them. A grim spark. I've spent 9 years learning how a person dies at a party, and the whole room calls it a heart attack. Let me show you how to do it back. Dominic looked at her across the table at the steel in her. The 9 years of patience turned to a blade, and something in his face that had been frozen for a decade finally fully thawed. Marry me, he said. She stared. Not the trap. Not the alliance. He reached across the notebook and took her ink-stained hand in both of his. When this is over, when they're in the ground and your father's name is clean and the whole city knows what you are, marry me, Vera Hale. I have been the most feared man in this city for 10 years, and I have never once been afraid of dying. You walked into my life with your bare hand on my cup, and now I am terrified of it every day because of you. That's how I know. His voice was barely a breath. Say you'll be alive at the end of this with me. Say it and I'll burn down the world to make it true. The right thing, the safe thing, was to say nothing. To finish the case, take her vindication, and walk back out into the cold alone, the way she'd survived everything. I'll be alive at the end of this with you, Vera said. Now help me set the table. We have a wedding to ruin. Chapter 8. The Last Pour. They held the wedding in an old stone church on the harbor fog, rolling off the black water, black SUVs lining the snowed-in street like a funeral that hadn't admitted what it was yet. Everyone who mattered in the city came. The Marchettis came, Aldo at their head, smiling like a man about to inherit. Salvatore came smiling like a man about to be king. Celeste came in white, the ringleader at the summit of her long climb, the crime about to be sealed in front of God and 300 witnesses. And Vera Hale came too, back in the black uniform, pouring the wine. Invisible, exactly as planned. Because the plan was simple and it was hers. She had spent 2 days on the wine. The toast at the reception, the great unifying toast to the union of two great families, would be poured by the bride's own family from the Marchetti's own reserve, the way Celeste had insisted, because Celeste never could resist a stage. Vera had not touched their bottles. She would never be so crude. What she had done was far quieter and far more cruel. She had switched the seals. She had taken Salvatore's framed crate, the poisoned lot from the cellar, the one meant to be discovered at the scene of Dominic's death, to damn a rival, and she had over 2 patient nights made it tell the truth instead of lie. She had laid a paper trail of her own threaded through the catering manifests and the cellar logs and the notebook now sitting sealed with a lawyer across town, a trail that did not lead to a framed rival or a dead Don. It led line by inevitable line straight back to Salvatore Castellano and Celeste Marchetti, and she had made sure of one last thing, that the federal prosecutor, Dominic, had quietly turned 3 weeks before a man whose daughter, it turned out, had been at that gala 9 years ago, and remembered what they did to the importer's girl would be standing in that church in a guest's borrowed suit with a warrant in his breast pocket, and 4 field agents in the fog outside. All Vera had to do was pour. The vows were said. The reception spilled into the candlelit hall beside the church, all gold light and white roses, and the toast was called. And Aldo Marchetti rose with the family reserve and filled the head table's glasses with his own hand. Dominic Celestis Salvatore's. The room lifted its crystal to the union of 2 great families, and Vera Hale, invisible in black, stepped forward to refill the bride's glass, leaned in close under the cover of service, and said very softly, so only Celeste could hear, "Bitter almonds. You never could get it out from under your nails." She set the bottle down. "Do you remember a girl in a borrowed dress 9 years ago? You spilled a drink on her, and you laughed, and you killed her father with a counterfeit case of Burgundy, and you never even learned her name." She straightened, and for the first time in 9 years, she let Celeste Marchetti see her, truly see her, and watch the recognition crawl up that perfect face like frost. "My name is Vera Hale, and I told you the help remembers everything." Celeste's champagne smile cracked like ice over deep water. "You," she breathed. "The importers drink your toast," Celeste Vera said. "Everyone's watching." And everyone was, because at the head of the room, Dominic Castellano had set down his glass without drinking and risen to his full height, and the whole gold-lit hall had gone quiet the way a room goes quiet when the most dangerous man in it decides to speak. "Before we drink," Dominic said, calm, carrying unhurried, "I want to thank my uncle Salvatore for his loyalty." His grey eyes found Salvatore's across the candlelight, and there was nothing warm in them at all, for 10 years of it. "Ever since my father died." A pause that stretched like a wire. "Tell me, uncle, did he taste the bitter almonds before he understood, or after?" The room held its breath. Salvatore Castellano was a smiler, but he was not a fool, and he saw his death arrive in his nephew's face. His hand went inside his jacket, and that was the moment everything that had been wound tight for 10 years finally broke loose at once. Chapter 9. Blood and Candlelight. Salvatore's gun came up and Dominic was already moving, not toward his uncle but toward Vera, across 20 feet of candlelight, because in the half-second the world tipped into violence. The only calculation left in him was her. The first shot went wide and shattered a window into the fog. The second took one of Salvatore's own men, as the room erupted, screaming, glass and roses and bodies in evening dress diving for the marble. Aldo Marchetti reached for the inside of his coat. Celeste, in her white dress, snatched up the silver cake knife with the flat-eyed calm of a woman who had handled worse, and lunged not for Dominic, for Vera, because Celeste Marchetti had finally understood 9 years too late exactly who had buried her, and she meant to take the importer's daughter with her into the dark. Vera did not freeze. She had stopped freezing the night an intruder came up the service stairs. She caught Celeste's knife arm at the wrist that still smelled faintly of bitter almonds, and the 2 women crashed back into the head table in a storm of crystal and white linen, and Vera, who had poured wine for the cruelest people in this city for 9 years and memorized every weakness they let slip, drove her knee where it would fold a person and twisted the blade loose, and put Celeste Marchetti down onto the marble in front of 300 of the most important people in Boston, exactly where Celeste had once put her. "Don't let them see you fold," Vera said, breathing hard, the knife clattering away. "Somebody told me that once." And then the doors of the church hall boomed open, and the fog came in, and with it came 4 federal agents and a prosecutor with a warrant into a room, already collapsing into Salvatore's gunfire. And through all of it, like a current, through black water, came Dominic. He reached her as the 3rd shot went off. He turned his body into it between Vera and his uncle's gun, and she felt the impact go through him like a fist as the round meant for her tore into his shoulder. And he didn't fall. He didn't even slow. He just got her behind him, and he raised his own gun and he ended it. 1 shot. Clean. Salvatore Castellano, smiler traitor, the man who'd murdered a don and tried to murder his nephew, went down among the white roses and did not get up. And the 10-year war was over in the time it takes a candle to gut her. Then the room was guns and shouting and federal badges. and Aldo Marchetti was face down on the marble with an agent's knee in his back, and Celeste was being dragged up off the floor in her bloodied white dress, screaming a confession she didn't know she was giving every crime in. Vera's notebook spilling out of her in front of the prosecutor and 300 witnesses and every socialite who had ever laughed. And in the middle of it, in the candlelight, Dominic Castellano sank to one knee, not from the bullet, though the blood was already black, down his white shirt, and pulled Vera Hale down with him into his arms, his face pressed into her hair, his whole body shaking with something that had nothing to do with the wound. "You're alive," he said, like he couldn't believe it, like it was the only sentence left in the language. "You're alive, you impossible woman. You're alive. You got shot." Vera sobbed into his neck, her hands pressed to the wound, slick and red, holding him together the way she'd once held a glass. "You idiot. You stepped in front of it. Why?" "Because there's a whole world I'd burn down for you, Dominic." Castellano said into her hair in a stone church, gone gold with candles and red with blood, and I needed to still be in it. His arm tightened around her. "Chin up, Vera. Look what you did." She looked. The room that had once turned its back on a crying girl in a borrowed dress was turned now toward Vera Hale on her knees in the candlelight, holding the city's most feared man together with her bare hands, while the people who'd destroyed her were dragged out into the fog in handcuffs. Margot Devlin white-faced, Sloane Ashby, her camera forgotten, the whole glittering pack of them finally silent, looking at the woman they'd erased and finding her impossible to look away from. Vera Hale had buried all of them, exactly like he said. Chapter 10. The world that finally saw her. Dominic Castellano did not die, though the surgeon at the luxury hospital said it was closer than a man his age had any right to walk away from. Vera did not leave his side. She sat in the chair by the bed through 3 days of fever, holding a hand that had ended his uncle's life. And when his eyes finally opened and found her first, always first, before the room, before the pain, he didn't say, "You're safe," or "We won." He said, hoarse and faintly amazed, "You're still here," as though that of everything were the impossible part. It was on the 4th day, fetching a clean shirt from the apartment he kept near the hospital, that Vera found the photographs. She wasn't snooping. A drawer slid open under her hand, and there it was, a flat leather case worn soft at the corners, and inside it photographs of her, dozens of them. Some recent Vera at a wine auction last spring, Vera leaving her certification exam, Vera laughing at something outside a restaurant she'd worked, and some that stopped her heart, grainy older girl of 19 in a borrowed dress at a charity gala, chin lifted, mascara streaked, refusing to fold. He had kept that night. He had kept her. For 9 years, the most feared man in Boston had carried a quiet, careful watch over a girl he'd handed a handkerchief to and never expected to see again. Not surveillance, not obsession, but something stranger and gentler. A man who had decided long before he knew her name that the world was not allowed to break her twice. She was still holding them when he found her there that evening, leaning on a cane, his shoulder bound. He saw the case in her hands and stopped, and for the first time since she'd known him, Dominic Castellano looked something close to afraid. "I had them check on you over the years," he said quietly. "Once a year, just to know you were all right. I told myself it was nothing, a breath. It was never nothing. I just didn't have the courage to call it what it was until you put your hand on my glass." He met her eyes. "Are you frightened of me now?" "No," Vera said, and her voice broke on it, and she crossed the room and put her arms around him, careful of the wound. "No. I spent 9 years thinking one stranger's kindness was the only reason I survived. I didn't know he kept surviving it too. The prosecutor's case took 11 months, and it never had a chance of failing because it had been built by an invisible woman with a perfect nose and 9 years of patience, and there is no defense in the world against an honest accountant of crimes. Celeste Marchetti went to prison for the murder of a man named Renato, the attempted murder of Dominic Castellano, and when an old reopened file finally found its way to the right desk, the conspiracy that destroyed Julian Hale, Aldo Marchetti went with her. The great alliance that was supposed to crown a traitor king instead salted the earth of 2 families at once, and the city's old money, which had laughed at an importer's daughter, found itself reading her name in the papers under headlines that used words like whistleblower and heroine, and in one breathless society column, the woman who saw through all of them. Julian Hale's name was cleared in a courtroom on a Tuesday in spring. Vera sat in the front row, and listened to a judge say out loud the thing she'd spent 9 years building toward, that the seals had been switched, that the great Julian Hale had been innocent, that his honor was restored. She did not cry until she was outside in the sun. And when she did, there was a handkerchief in her hand before the first tear fell, pressed there by a man with gray eyes and his arm in a healing sling, who had stood up for her once a long time ago and had simply never stopped. "You kept it," she said, recognizing the cloth. 9 years old, soft with handling the corner she'd worried smooth in 1,000 bad nights. "That's yours," Dominic said. "I bought a new one." He turned her gently to face him in the courthouse sun. "I had the old one for 9 years too, you know. The memory of it. A girl who wouldn't fold." His thumb brushed the tear from her cheek. "I told myself I forgot you. I'm a very good liar. It's the only thing I was ever better at than you." A pause. "Marry me, Vera Hale. Not for a trap, not for a war. Because I have been alive for 1 year for the first time in 10. And it's you. It was always going to be you. I think it was you the night I handed you that handkerchief and didn't know what I was starting." The city moved around them. The cruel and the kind, the powerful and the invisible, all the people who had never seen her. "Yes," Vera said. Chapter 11. The Last Glass. They married in the spring on a terrace over the harbor, with no SUVs in the street and no fog on the water, and no one in attendance who had ever once made her feel small. There was good wine. Of course there was good wine. Vera poured the first glass herself, the way her father had taught her, listening to it, and she handed it to the man who had once nearly died at her hand. And Dominic Castellano lifted it to the light and looked at her over the rim. Not the closed door at the end of the hallway anymore, but a man, entirely, dangerously, devotedly hers. To the woman nobody noticed, he said low, only for her, who turned out to be the most important person in every room she was ever ignored in. "Drink your toast," Dominic Vera said and smiled. Everyone's watching, and for once they were. For once the whole world was looking at Vera Hale and finding her impossible to look away from. He drank. It was, she had made very sure, the cleanest glass of wine in the entire city of Boston. Somewhere across town that same night, in a penthouse that belonged to a different family and a different war, a young woman in a maid's uniform was carrying a tray of champagne into a room full of men who would never learn her name. One of them, the most dangerous one, was about to look up and see her for the very first time. But that's another story. And that's where we'll leave Vera and Dominic, the woman nobody noticed and the man who burned down a whole world just to be alive at the end of it with her. Here's what I want to know from you. The moment Vera put her bare hand over that glass, did you already know she was going to change everything? Tell me in the comments the exact second you fell for this story. And be honest, did you guess the poisoner was Celeste before the church? Or did that one get you? If this story kept you listening to the very end, do 3 quick things for me. Tap that like button. It genuinely helps these stories reach more people who'd love them. Share it with the one friend you know is just as obsessed with a dangerous, devoted mafia boss as you are. And subscribe, because a brand new story drops soon, and you don't want to be the one who misses it. One more thing, you help me write what comes next. Down in the comments, leave me your dream setup for the next overlooked woman story. A nurse who saves the wrong man's life. A single mother hiding a secret in a city of neon. A runaway bride who walks straight into the back of a black SUV. Drop your idea below. The comment I love most might just become next week's episode, and I'll shout you out when it does. Until then, keep your chin up. You never know who's finally about to see you. I'll see you in the next one.